Let's talk about one of the most famous names in all of history, Ramesses II. You see, he didn't just rule an empire of people and land. No, he built something much more lasting, an empire of memory.
And that's really the key to understanding him. The reason Ramesses is so famous, why his name is everywhere, isn't just because of what he did. It's because he was a master at telling his own story, and he carved that story into stone so it would last forever.
And that's the real question we're digging into today, isn't it? We're going to look at how the most powerful man on Earth built this incredible image of himself, this story of constant victory, even when reality was, well, a lot messier. And we'll see what that ultimately meant for the empire he left behind.
Okay, so to really get Ramesses, you have to know the world he inherited. Egypt was kind of having an identity crisis, and this young pharaoh came in with a massive plan to fix it, by controlling the story, the entire narrative.
First off, the man had time. So much time. He was on the throne for an incredible 66 years. I mean, that's not just a long reign, that's an entire lifetime. It gave him this unbelievable chance to literally remake Egypt's landscape and its memory in his own image.
And you know, this massive PR campaign he went on wasn't just pure ego. It was actually smart politics. See, the pharaoh right before his time, Akhenaten, had turned the whole religion upside down, saying there was only one God. It caused chaos. So Ramesses had to bring back faith not just in the old gods, but in the idea that the pharaoh himself was divine. It was a recovery mission.
And he had a clear playbook. Step 1, go back and claim the past. He'd literally have the names of earlier pharaohs chiseled off monuments and have his own carved right over them. Step 2, build, and build big. He started a construction boom like Egypt had never seen. Step 3, he built a whole new capital city, Ramesses, a giant hub for his power. And the final step, make himself a god on earth, showing himself side by side with the gods at incredible places like Abu Simbel.
So, with his plan locked in and decades to make it happen, Ramesses was ready to seal his legacy. And the ultimate test for his propaganda machine? Well, that would be the most famous battle of his entire reign, the Battle of Kadesh.
So here's the setup. It's a classic clash of superpowers. You've got the Hittite Empire pushing down from the north, trying to take over valuable land and trade routes. And the city of Kadesh is right in the middle of it all. So, in 1274 BCE, Ramesses leads this enormous army north to settle things once and for all.
But what actually happened there is where the story gets really interesting. The official version, the one Ramesses had carved on temple walls all over Egypt, tells of a heroic victory where he personally saved the day. But the military reality? Well, historians now know he was tricked into an ambush and his army was almost wiped out. It was a chaotic mess, a stalemate at best, and in the end, his army had to retreat without ever taking the city of Kadesh.
And this is the absolute genius of his propaganda. He knew that if you repeat a story enough times, it becomes the truth. By carving his version of Kadesh everywhere, he made it the only version that anyone would ever see. He didn't have to convince people he won. He just made it impossible for them to ever hear the other side of the story.
And the irony of it all? Years later, the whole conflict was settled not with swords, but with words. Ramesses and the Hittites signed the very first international peace treaty we have any record of. And of course, Ramesses spun that as a huge win too, proof of his incredible wisdom and power.
But, while Ramesses was laser-focused on carving his perfect image into stone for everyone to see, a very different story was unfolding back home. There were some serious cracks forming in the foundations of the empire, right there in the shadows of his throne.
So even though the pharaoh's face was everywhere, the real power, the economic power, was shifting. And you might be surprised to learn that the biggest landowner in all of Egypt wasn't the pharaoh. It was the priests of the god Amun, and their power was growing every day.
Yes, some historians think the Temple of Amun ended up controlling maybe a third of all the good farmland in Egypt. They weren't just religious figures, they were like a giant corporation. They had their own staff, their own workers, even their own private armies. The pharaoh was the face of Egypt, but these priests were controlling the money.
So, at the same time the pharaoh's real power is being chipped away from the inside, a terrifying new threat starts to appear from the outside. A mysterious force was on the move, and was about to throw the entire ancient world into chaos.
We call them the Sea Peoples, but for the Egyptians, they were just this wave of pure destruction pouring in from the Mediterranean. And honestly, even today, we're still trying to figure out exactly who they were and where they came from.
So what made them so scary? Well, they weren't just pirates. They were moving with their families, their entire populations, looking for new land.
They completely destroyed whole civilizations, including the Hittites, Egypt's old rivals. And they were fighting in a new way, with iron weapons that the old Bronze Age armies just couldn't handle. So, a few decades after Ramesses the Great, another pharaoh, Ramesses III, had to face these guys head-on. He actually managed to win. He saved Egypt from being completely wiped out. But it was a victory that cost everything. The war bankrupted the country, which led to the first labor strike in recorded history because the government couldn't pay its workers anymore, and the pharaoh himself, weakened by it all, was assassinated. He won the battle, but the empire was shattered.
And that brings us right back to our guy, Ramesses II. He spent his whole life building this image of immortal strength and eternal victory. But when the dust settled, what was the real result of his empire of memory? It's a total paradox, really. For him, personally, his strategy was a wild success. His name, his face, they're everywhere. To most people, he is ancient Egypt. He absolutely 100% won the war for memory. But the empire itself, it just couldn't handle the reality that he had spent his reign ignoring. The power grabs from within and the new threats from without. After him, Egypt started its long, slow fall.
So in the end, Ramesses II makes you wonder, right? The actual empire he ruled, with all its armies and its wealth, it's gone. It turned to dust. But the story he told, the one he carved into those stone temples, that survived for more than 3,000 years. Maybe he knew all along that power fades, but a good story can last forever.